This is Unpacking Success, and I'm with Mario today. And what's really interesting about this is Mario comes from New York City. And when you have lived in New York City or any big city, but specifically like the biggest city, right? Like the Big Apple. And you come from New York City, and it's
Big
really
Apple.
So do New Yorkers call it the Big Apple, or is that something that they don't?
No, I think that is a term that is just for
tourists.
Yeah, tourism.
Yeah, okay.
100%.
All right, so I want to go all the way back, but before we do,
Have you ever seen a New Yorker wearing an "I love" with the Big Apple, New York? Right? Have you ever seen that? You've never seen that, right?
Never.
I'm gonna get one. I'm gonna get one and start wearing it around town.
So what's interesting about this and what I'm excited for is that you come from New York City, you worked as an electrician, but there's a lot of things that happened before that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that have happened from the Mario in New York to the Mario who owns a successful business here in Prescott, Arizona. But what I want to do is I want to unpack all of that.
Sure.
And so before we do all of that, I want to let the listeners know that Mario owns Allied Electric with his wife Amber. They have an amazing team here in Prescott. So if you have any electric needs for your home or for your business or anything like that, hit them up. They are fantastic. So that's a little bit about Mario, who he is today. So let's now go back. So for the listeners, you're talking to these people, you're talking to me, whatever. But tell them, number one, who you are and how you got into that electric space.
Sure. Yeah. So it was, and I hear the story a lot with other people. People go to school for a certain thing and then they wind up doing something completely different. And that was the same case. So I was a musician, and I went to school. My passion is music. I love music. And so I went to school after high school, I went to school for recording music. I waited a couple. I tried the college thing, didn't work. I was just never good in school.
Yeah.
You know, like as a kid, I got thrown out of a bunch of high schools. Like I was just, so I went to this school for recording music. It was called IAR. Funny enough, one of the guys who works for me, one of the team members, he actually went there as well, which is really, really wild. But so I went there, went to school, was learning the whole audio engineering thing, you know, making cables and all this other stuff. And when I was interning in Manhattan, and I worked for a place called Ears Expert Audio, which was owned by two guys. One guy's name was Jeff, and the other guy's name was Doug. Jeff was an English guy who was actually the live sound guy for Pink Floyd during the Wall tour back in, I think it was like 80.
Okay.
And so he would build a lot of like boutique gear, like pedals and stuff like that. He actually had the warranty work for all of the Mackie equipment that would come through. So I was interning there, and it wasn't recording music, but it was at least getting my hands into fixing things and learning that end of it, which I really wasn't interested in, to be honest with you. I wasn't.
So let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
So you got into that job. Why did you get into that job? Just because you didn't want to wait tables, college wasn't working out? It just seemed like the only thing?
So no. So I've always, my whole life, I did like, when I was a kid, I did like demolition work. After high school, I was doing like, I used to unload trains actually before that, and it was like not trains. It was a lot of freight. So my family owned a business in the Hunts Point Terminal Market, produce. They're in the produce industry.
Okay.
My father's sister's husband side of the family. So I worked there for a while, which was miserable. I hated it. It was an awful neighborhood. Like it wasn't for me. It just wasn't my thing. And then I started waiting tables. Got out of there, and then while I was going to school for recording, I just wanted to be in the music scene in some facet, and I played guitar, and and I figured it'd be easy to find a band and get into a band if I was in that world, right? So that's what got me going to school for recording music. I love the theory end of it. I love that type of stuff. I like the math and all that other crap. But that's how I got into it. So long story endless, I'm going to school there. I'm really happy. I'm doing my thing. And so I started interning. I was interning. I was still going to school while I was working for this place. But that guy, I hit it off with those guys. They liked me. I liked them. And one day the guy, Jeff, because I asked him, I said, hey, is there any way you could hire me?
Yeah.
That'd be cool, you know?
Yeah.
And because I was interning between there and a studio. The studio was called Brass Giraffe. And I believe it was on 20. It was like right around the corner from this place that I was interning at. And that sucked. Like I was bored. Like there was like one other engineer working in there. Like it was just like, it wasn't my thing. So I asked this guy, Jeff, I'm like, hey, could you hire me? He's like, can't hire you. Economy's bad right now. Like,
What year was this?
This was like 2000, I want to say 2000,
Early 2000s.
Yeah,
Okay.
early 2000s.
Okay.
So I'm like, all right, and he was like, well, he's like, since you're really good with your hands, he's like, why don't you? And you want to get into a studio, you know, why don't you become an electrician? Why don't you go work with an electrical contractor, learn how to be an electrician, and you can get in any studio you want.
Yeah.
So that made sense to me. So I'm like, all right, cool. And I knew nothing about it, you know.
Yeah.
My father had a friend who was an electrician, who owned his own company, this old Italian guy, Joe, who I'm still, and Joe, if you ever see this, you know, I won't curse you on here, but we've cursed each other enough. We still do. But so I started working with him. And so Joe did a lot of work in the South Bronx. So I wound up going there. I hated it.
Yeah.
I had no interest in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was cool, you know, the idea of being an electrician, but I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I really, you know, it was construction. I wasn't, you know. But that's how I started in the electrical field. I never stepped into a studio again. I stayed with it. I never stepped into a studio again until years later when I had a band and I wound up recording. And,
Okay.
But yeah, I tell the story a lot. So I used to travel. At the time I was living in Staten Island. So to travel from Staten Island to the South Bronx is like a 3-hour commute on public transportation each way.
Yeah.
And if anybody who knows the South Bronx, I used to take the train to 169th Street and Southern Boulevard, which is Hunts Point train station. Now, this is going back 24 years ago, right? It wasn't a good place at all.
Just dangerous.
Yeah, very, very rough area, right? And so this guy tells me to meet him at the train station at like 7 o'clock in the morning for work. So I'm like, all right, you're going to be, and I didn't have a cell phone back then. Like I didn't have a cell phone.
Right.
And I'm like, you're going to meet me there? He goes, yeah. He's like, I'll be there at 7 o'clock. So first day I get there, no sign of him. I'm standing out there, you know, like a sitting duck on the corner waiting for this guy to pick me up. And I wind up calling him from a payphone. He's like, I'm going to be like 2 hours late. So first day it happens, second day it happens, third. After the first 5 days, I'm like, all right, you're gonna get me killed out here. So
what kind of things would you see?
Just like I was like, you know, I was exposed. Let's just put it that way. Like it was
what?
Like just in a really bad area where you don't belong there. Clearly, you don't belong there, right? It's not your area.
Yeah.
And you know, people either think you're a cop or you're looking to buy drugs. So you know. And they'll sniff you out sooner than later, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, but I think that the thing that saved me was they probably thought I was a cop, so nobody, you know, so they just
gave the cop vibe.
Yeah, but so what I did was after a while I started to walk. I took my chances walking, which was about a mile away.
Okay.
The job site, which was through an industrial area where there was nothing but like loose dogs and. So it was hairy, and I did that for $60 a day.
Yeah.
So that was I was getting paid $60 cash a day,
right?
And but you know what? I learned the trade, and I was it. This is before I got into the union, and I wound up getting into the union later on. But yeah,
were you living in New York City when the World Trade Center happened?
No, so I was living in Staten Island when the World Trade Center happened, but I was in the city when the building collapsed. I was actually like probably 4 or 5 blocks away from the first tower when it collapsed.
So did you see it happen?
Yeah. I was I mean, if you've ever been to New York and you 4 or 5 blocks away from those buildings, you're still looking up at them because they're so enormous, right?
Holy.
So it was.
So what was that like?
Oh, it was. Well, so it was crazy. I was in Union Square at the time, which was 14th Street, and my sister was working downtown, actually, right near the Trade Center. I had an older sister that worked down there, so I was going. The plane crashed into the building. Second plane crashed into the building. I told my friend, hey, my sister's downtown. Like I don't know. We didn't know what was going on at the time. I mean, by the time the second plane hit, I think we knew what was going on by that point.
You didn't think it was an accident at that point?
No.
Right.
The first one, I remember I was on university when the first plane hit. Nobody knew what was going on. I remember coming outside the building. Somebody said an NYU building was on fire. So we walked outside the building, and right there we saw, you know, the smoke billowing out of the towers. The one tower. And
did you hear it?
No. We were far enough away where we didn't hear anything. But it was directly in line with University Place. So you had a straight shot to the Trade Center. So it was like, I remember thinking to myself, wow, whatever just blew up in that building or hit it just killed a lot of people. That was my first thought. I remember telling my friend Glenn, who I actually just spoke to not too long ago. We were together that day. And Yeah, it was, and then went back in the building. By the time we got back in the building, the second plane hit, and then we knew that there was something. That's when I grabbed my stuff and I started to head downtown.
Yeah.
And by the time I got down to, because like I said, it was a good enough distance away. By the time I got down to, crossed over Chinatown, crossed over Varick Street, that's when the buildings, I believe, they collapsed. It's kind of blurry now, like thinking back, but yeah, that's when the first building collapsed.
It was crazy to see how, and I was young during that time, but even just like looking back and hearing the stories and hearing people's like just firsthand testimonies of what happened and all of these different things, it's crazy to see how united the country became.
Yeah.
Like you lived through that time.
Yeah.
Like was it pretty dramatic as to how that happened?
Oh, absolutely. So it was yeah, and like you just said, so everybody mobilized, right? So I used to hang out. I was 21 when that happened.
Yeah.
I used to hang out in a bar on Staten Island, which was mostly cops, firemen, construction workers, right? And I'd been hanging out in bars my whole life, you know. So that was like our hangout. It was called a bar called Donovan's. It was on Victory Boulevard, and I heard a lot of stories from guys who were working down there. You know, I tried to volunteer. One of our friends who was a bartender, he lost his fiance. So we had gone
in the attack.
So I remember the next day we went. It was my friend Danny's cousin. So he was like, "Hey, Craig, we're gonna go down and bring his wife's fiance's pictures to the Armory because that's where everybody was going."
Yeah.
So we'd gone down there, and you know, he was going to bring her stuff, I guess, and yeah, it was wild, man. I remember. So taking the express bus into the city, it was like, I remember I forget, National Guard. So we would go through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel to get in Manhattan, and they would stop the buses. National Guard would come on the buses and just check the buses. It was, but people really did mobilize, come together, and it really felt like, wow, like, you know, I know everybody has this rap about New York about it being just this, you know, but
everybody out for themselves.
No, it wasn't like that, man. Especially in Staten Island where there's a lot of neighborhoods, Brooklyn, like people really, I mean, a lot of families lost people. So I know one lady passed away who lived my father's block. They wound up naming the street after her, but it was really nice to see that. But it's sad to see that it has to come to that.
Something like that has to happen in order for people to come together.
Right. But there was definitely a sense of camaraderie, of like, you know, nationalism. People really came together and were like, you know, I mean,
it's sad to think like we said, something like a terrorist attack on our country has to happen in order for us to remember that we're all Americans, we're all brothers and sisters, all of those things. Yeah. And it's crazy because it's like, it's just sad that stuff like that has to happen, because even from 2001 when it happened to today, you could see how far apart we've become.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's really sad.
And, you know, for me, going back and looking back at it in hindsight, right, because, you know, we have that 2020 vision. At the time, it was like people came together in a way where it was like, oh, let's go and just decimate that country over there. Let's just go over there, and because nobody really knew it was. All we knew is that 3,000 American people just got killed on American soil, on national television.
Innocent
people. This civilian people got killed. So if there's, and I don't want to get too far into the politics of it, but if there was ever a way to get a country behind going into another country, that would be the way to do it. Right. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say that. You know, I don't want to get into the conspiracy theories or anything like that, but looking back at the situation, and even being there at the time, like somebody would have said that to me 23 years ago, I probably would have slapped him. Yeah. Because it would have been it would have been blasphemous to say something like that. You know what I mean? So, but looking back now, it's like, you know, I hope that wasn't the case. I hope, you know, we'll probably never know. But
there's a lot of conspiracies around that whole thing, and that's also sad because it's like, just let the families.
It is what it is.
Yeah, move on.
What happened. Yeah, I mean,
especially now with AI, they're coming out. Like I even see more things coming out now of like, you know, here's what really happened and here's the real story behind it. Yeah. And it's like, just let it be what it is. Like it's happened. It's over. It happened 20 plus years ago. It's done.
Yeah, and I don't hold like so. And I'm a New Yorker, right? I mean, I was born in Brooklyn. I'm from New York. it was thinking back now. I remember being there. As a kid, my father was a construction worker. He was a labor a shop steward for Tishman, which is a big. They put up. He worked in the towers when they were first going up in '73. They were just finishing the buildings in '73. He was 16, so it was his first job.
Yeah.
My grandfather had a lot of friends in the union, and that's why they were able to. He wasn't for school, so they were able to get him in.
Right.
And so. He would take me to work with him sometimes when I was a kid, and taking the ferry across, and you see the towers downtown. And I used to always ask him, what do you think it would look like? But this is what was really odd. What do you think it would look like if those buildings fell down? Like, would they fall into the water? Like, as a little kid, you just, I don't know. So to be there that day
and watch him just go,
actually see that building come down, it was for me, it was so surreal because I remember asking that question, and now I got the answer, and it was just like, whoa, and it was like the loudest thing I had. It actually felt the building start to come down before it started coming down. I know that sounds really weird, but it was. I remember looking at my friend because we were kind of like jogging, had our heads down, and at one point, I remember looking up, and there was so much smoke that you really couldn't see the top of the building, but you knew it was coming. It was coming down, and it was just like,
jeez.
Yeah, it was just like, oh my God. Like, but things happen so quickly, and I don't know if it's like
that's wild.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like, I think I've heard people say this in like situations in like war, like PTSD, where they actually see an event happen in slow motion. So it was happening very quickly, but at the same time, it was like happening in slow motion, if that makes any. It was really weird, but yeah,
I can see that. So once it started coming down, then you actually heard it at that point, right? So you didn't hear the initial. Everybody heard it.
It was. It sounded like to me, it sounded like the loudest machine gun fire.
Really?
I mean, that building came down so fast. It was just like,
oh man.
It was like it was there and then it wasn't there. I mean, you couldn't see anything because, first of all, you couldn't see. Once that building came down, it was like, well, you couldn't see the top of the building anyway because there was so much smoke from the billowing. But when it came down, it was just like you couldn't see shit. Like it was like an apocalypse. Like it was really strange. And honestly, from where I had to be about 5 blocks away from where we were. In my mind, all I remember thinking about my sister and thinking that there's no way anybody closer than us could have survived that. I just can't imagine how anybody could have just survived that.
Yeah.
And then seeing the second one come down from the bridge, I was on top of the bridge. I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge I was on. Because I remember you couldn't, obviously, you were.
Traffic was done.
No, there was people were running. So it was like getting out. Like they were directing everybody to go over the bridge. So I remember seeing the second one fall down, and we were walking across the bridge. I remember somebody had nobody knew what the hell was going on. Like it was just like somebody was walking close to us in where I could hear it, and they said the Pentagon had just got hit. And at that point, it was like the smoke was over the bridge. We just seen the building collapse.
Yeah.
And the other one is just standing there by itself now. And I remember it was hot that day. I remember looking at it. I remember stopping and looking at it. And again, it was so surreal. But I remember looking at the top of the building, and the sun was reflecting off and I just remember seeing the windows getting blowing out, and I remember just the building coming down, and it was just like everybody on the bridge just stopped and was just like in hysterics. It was just so crazy.
That's
man.
Really sad.
Yeah.
I've seen videos like on Facebook and social media and everything of when the building was on fire and it was coming down, there's smoke everywhere. And you would see people like jumping because it was just like either jump or get burned alive. Yeah. Did you see that at all?
No. So I did not see that. And I'm glad I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I had friends that were close. My friend's father worked at One Liberty, which was actually, he had a meet, and you hear these stories over and over again. My friend Greg's father had a breakfast meeting at Windows of the World that morning. And I don't think his wife knew until later on that, he was okay, which is awful. But he had seen people jumping, and I mean, it's right. I mean, they're literally right there in that plaza. Gosh. So that was like,
that's horrible.
Yeah. I didn't see anything. Thankfully, you know what? I wasn't paying attention really. I was just in
You're probably just worried about your sister. Like, where is she? And that's it.
And when I was walking over the bridge before that second one collapsed, I was thinking, there's no way. After that second building collapsed, in my mind, I was like, there's no way that she's alive. There's no way my friend Greg's brother worked down there. I was like, there's no way any of them. I was just thinking of all the people I knew that worked down there. I'm like, there's no way anybody could have survived that.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what I really want to do is I want to dive into the entrepreneurial side of your journey.
Yeah.
You've had a long journey when it comes to that, like just living in New York City, competing, doing what you did there. Had to have been a trip of its own. And so what I really want to do is I want to provide value to a very specific audience, right?
Sure.
And you know what it takes to be just a regular tradesman, to owning your own business, to owning a successful business and operating with employees and doing all of these different things. There's somebody that may watch this video, may watch the words come out of your mouth and listen to you and be like, wow, I don't have to be where I am today forever.
Right.
There is more for me on the other side.
Absolutely,
and unfortunately, there's a lot of people who just don't believe that and don't see that.
Yeah.
And so what I want you to do is I want to walk through the journey of when you started thinking about owning your own business. Was that always something that you had thought about? Or is that something that you eventually developed because you were like, you know what? I'm tired of being broke. I'm tired of whatever the case may be. Maybe have you ever been broke?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So like when I was waiting tables, I mean, I didn't have a pot to piss in.
Yeah.
I was doing this thing. I was going to school, and I love money. I've always I just wanted to live a comfortable life like everybody else does, right? And I would do anything it took. I mean, sometimes when I talk to people, like, why you went with how far for how much? And it's like, well, if I didn't do those things, I never would be where I am right now. And if I wasn't willing, it's not even so much that, but it's like, if I wasn't, there's a certain level of tenacity you have to do something, right? If I wasn't willing to do the things I did back then, I never would have been willing to do what it took me to get out here in the first place.
Right. So do you think moving from New York to Arizona was something that allowed you to make that leap?
Yeah. So,
and would you have done it regardless?
So, okay. So, I was living on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. We lived in a beautiful neighborhood. We lived in a great apartment. We were on York Avenue and 88th Street. So we lived in between Central Park and East River, which is really nice, right near Gracie. I lived on the same block as Gracie Mansion, which is where the mayor lives.
Oh, okay. Right? And what were you doing at that time?
I was an electrician. This is fast forward. This is right before we moved.
But this is not you as a business owner. This is you as an electrician.
Me as an electrician. Yeah.
Got it.
So, okay, so let's back up a little bit. So I had said I got into the union back in like 2002, I think it was, or 2000. Yeah, 2002. So I worked with Joe, non-union. We used to work. I remember back then it was like everything was union in the city.
Yeah.
Like it was like the union had everything sewed up there, right?
Yeah.
So he was a non-union contractor, electrician.
Right.
He had his license going back to like I think Joe got his license at 66, 67, something like that. But so he's an older fella.
Right.
And he got a job at the Empire State Building doing lighting on the observation deck.
Okay.
So I remember, Joe had a van and we used to, work in the market, and we did it was mostly commercial industrial work, that heavy stuff that we did, right?
Yeah.
But not big stuff because it was a small shop, but like, just all high voltage and stuff like that. He gets his job in the Empire State Building, and at that time, everything was union.
Yeah.
You weren't walking in that building if you weren't a union contractor,
Okay.
right? So I remember he told me, we got to work nights. So I'm like, I didn't want to do that because, again, I was, a musician. I was trying to do two things at one time, right? I was just starting this career as an electrician.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. So anyway, I'm like, Joe, I meet him in the city, and he pulls up in a station wagon. And I'm like, and his blankets over his, and I'm like, Joe, where's the van? He's like, oh, I can't bring the van here. I'm like, why? He's like, oh, well, we can't go in that building and knowing that, we have to sneak in basically, like, because it's all union. So I'm like, this just didn't make any sense to me at the time. I didn't know politics at that time of that.
Well, explain that part. Explain that, because most people probably don't know.
Well, it was all union. So, I mean, if you were a non-union contractor, you didn't really belong in those. I mean, you'd see it. I mean, so in New York, when there's a non-union work going on because there's a rat outside the job and there's union delegates and, out there protesting that there's non-union. And I understand. They do it. So a lot of non-union historically is, the work isn't safe. It's not done the same way as the union would, up to the same specifications. And because there's no, I mean, they are bound, if they're licensed contractor, they are bound by, that. I mean, they have to do the work, but it's just the union wants the union to be in there. I mean, obviously they want to secure the work.
Yeah.
So we would go in. It wasn't a big job. It was just like lighting and, but it was cool to work up there. You know? So we would work up there at midnight after they would close everything down. And it was cool because I got to walk around and linger around the Empire State in areas where normally you wouldn't be able to go. Right. You know what I mean? So that was pretty cool. But shortly after that, I wound up getting into the union. And I stayed in the union for years. And then at some point, I think it was around 2009 or 2010, Joe was going to retire. And I had stayed friends with him throughout all this time. I literally had a key to this guy's house. I was like, he never had any kids, him and his wife. So I was like, his son, for basically, sure. Right? And people would think that I was his son, because we just had that love-hate relationship. Right. So, and in those days, he was in his 60s, so he was a lot older than my father. I mean, my father wasn't old, but so anyway, he was looking to retire, and he was like, So I was like, I would, I had already been, I was a mechanic. I knew what I was doing. So I was like, I would like to come in and work and eventually take over the business. Okay. So that was my first shot at trying to learn the business of, the workings of how it works, right? And it wound up not working out with him. He really didn't want to. He eventually didn't want to get out and kind of saw it. I think now saw it as when people started to pay attention to me and not him, and it was kind of
so it's an ego thing.
Yeah. So I was like, I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, and I was like, hey, if you're not comfortable with that, then I get it. Right. So I went back to the union. Okay. And stayed there until basically we left. So fast forward now, 2017, 2018, I'm working in the union. I was working on a job near my house, and I was just looking to go to some warmer climate, and we were looking at California, San Diego. Okay. And I was doing subway work at the time too, so I was working, crazy hours. I would work 50 hours during the week at my regular job, and then on the weekends I was doing Friday night. I would come home. So Friday, my day, I would not work overtime that day. I would leave work. I'd come home by like 3 o'clock. I lived in the city, so it was easy for me to get back to my apartment. Yeah. I'd take a shower, go to sleep, and then I would wake up at like 8, 9 o'clock and get ready for the subway shift. So that would be a 12-hour. So that shift went from 12 to 12 in the afternoon. Yeah. 12 at night, 12 a.m. to 12 in the afternoon. Yeah. So I would get ready, get all my gear on. Everything was, heavy stuff down there. Yeah. I mean, everything had to be respirators, heavy Carhartt. So all that work was for Hurricane Sandy that happened back in 2012. They were ripping out all the infrastructure of the tunnels because everything was damaged by salt water. So you have 130-year-old switches down there, signal cable, tracks, everything had to come out of those tunnels. So it was the Cranberry-Joralemon tunnel I was working at the time. So those are 2 tunnels that connect Brooklyn and Manhattan underwater. So I had started that work, which was paying me like $105 an hour at the time. It was very dangerous work. I mean, it's not a good environment. Yeah. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. Everybody knows what New York City's like, but now just imagine going and work. It's like a miner working down there. Right. Oh, for sure. The conditions were like horrendous. I can't. I've been in a lot of, like I said, I did non-union demolition work when I was a kid, so I know what bad working conditions are. I've actually been working in buildings in Brooklyn that the fire department came and condemned the building while I was working in it. So I know. I did boiler removal. For anybody out there who knows what these old 6-section boilers look like in these old department stores, I've taken those things out. So I know what heavy work. I know what bad conditions are. Right. And these were, if you can imagine. If you've ever been in New York in the summertime and you've been in the subway, you know how hot, humid, and just nasty it is. Yeah. Now, just imagine being clothed to the gill. I mean, you have long sleeves on, heavy boots on. Yeah. Like you have an 80-pound tool bag. So all the tools are really heavy down there. And you're just working in that humidity and heat. And you're working on a diesel train. So now you're in a tunnel that's enclosed. Yeah. And you have the spent diesel fuel that's just like a cloud above your head that you're working in. And you're drilling into this tunnel wall that's 130 years old. And it was just like, I would imagine what the miners went through in Pittsburgh in the early turn of the century. Could you imagine? Yeah. Yeah, so we'd walk out of the tunnel, black as night. I mean, I would come home. Just to give you a little, I'm probably talking too much, but just to give you a little background of what this situation was like. But so I would come home, and I was so filthy that I would climb out of the tunnel after our shift was over, sometimes, it was supposed to be a 12-hour shift. Sometimes it'd be a 16-hour shift. You'd be down there working. And you would sweat so bad that when I would take my boots off and my gloves, that my hands look like raisins. Like I was standing in bathwater all night. That's how, and just like, yeah. So I would be so filthy that I wouldn't even get on the train to go home because I couldn't. Like I was so filthy that I could not get on the train. I would have to call an Uber and get in a taxi or an Uber to go home because it was just that bad. And so I'd go home, shower like 3 or 4 times. I remember I would get to our apartment, me and Amber, she could tell you the story. So I would call her up on my way home and say, hey, throw a garbage bag in the hallway. I would literally strip down totally nude in the hallway of my building and put my clothes in that bag, wrap it up, and bring it to the laundromat. And because like, I wouldn't even walk in my house like that, my apartment. It was disgusting. Yeah. And then so I would quickly take a shower, eat something, go right to bed, wake up again. This is Saturday night now. I'm waking up 9 o'clock, and then I would go report to whatever tunnel or station we had to work in. And so I was working a lot of hours, man. Yeah. I was making a lot of money. Yeah. A lot of money, but I was working a lot of hours. And it afforded me the opportunity to just leave and get out here. And it's funny because people like, when I said I was going to leave, I was thinking about leaving. People thought I was insane because of one, where I lived. I lived in a great neighborhood. I was in the union for so long. I was never without a job. Yeah. I was making crazy money. Yeah. And at 38 years old to just pick up, usually at 38 years old, people are set in their career. They've been in their career for a while. Yeah. You're cruising through life at this point. You're cruising until you retire, right? Yeah, yeah. Well, I decided that it was a good idea to just pick up and go to a place where I didn't know anybody and didn't know if there was any opportunity. I just knew that I wanted to get out of New York. Yeah. I knew that I would have worked in a grocery store if I had to. I would have done anything that I had to because when we came to Sedona, we came there on vacation. And we were so enamored by this area that it was like, we would have done anything to stay. Yeah. And so it was just like, I was ready for the move. But, not often do you see. So you have to have, like going back to the and being that type of person. Yeah. And Amber's the same way in her respective field, that she's a very driven. She has that go-getter mentality. Yeah. If something doesn't work, she's going to find a way to do it. Yeah. So we're both very similar in that respect. Like, we'll make it work no matter what. So, although, and we tried to handle some other businesses before, like we were selling things on Amazon. I know we started a website development company. Like, we tried that. We sunk a bunch of money into it. But just having the ambition to do something, coming out here. And I remember I worked for a company, I'm not going to mention who it was, but I worked for a company out here, and I was working with somebody, and I remember mentioning to them, I'm like, I'm going to get my license out here, and I'm going to start my own business. And this guy said to me, he was from here, and he was like, you'll never get work because this is a good old boy. This is good old boy country, and nobody's going to hire a New Yorker. And I'm thinking to myself, we'll see.
So that's where I really want to dive deep. Is you moved out here from New York, right? You would work at a grocery store.
I know I said I would work. I didn't.
No, I know you would though. Yeah. Like you were so determined to come out. But what was that pivotal moment in your life where you were like, you know what? I want to start my own business. I know what I'm doing. I have the experience. Yeah. What was that pivotal moment of you saying to yourself, you know what? I'm going to do this. We're going to make it successful. Me and Amber. And we're going to do this thing. Was there a pivotal moment in your life where that came up?
Yeah. So, like I said, I was working for another company at the time. And we were living up at the apartments in the terraces up in Prescott Valley near the Kia dealership. And I remember coming home one day, and I was just like, I knew that I just needed to get a job to get my feet on the ground out here. Right. But I knew that I was going to do something. But there was so many holes that I had seen in the company that I was working in the way that they were servicing. Yeah. And I was running a commercial project for them at the time. Yeah. And I just could never, I just didn't feel like the quality was there. And I felt like that there was, and I'd seen outside of then, like, it seemed like nobody showed up on time. Nobody did what they said they were going to do. It was just like, I was like, wait, I've been doing this a long time. My whole life, basically, at this point. Like, half my life I've been doing this. Right. I've been in a lot of different areas of the electrical industry, and I was like, I was just spinning my wheels. I felt like I was like, wait, this is not working, and I think I just felt called to do it. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was and we wanted more for us, and the thing was, the biggest part of it was that bothered me is coming from a place. And I've left New York at one point back early in my career. I went to Florida and tried to work before I got in the union, and it was a right to work state. And again, you couldn't make money there. You couldn't, right. For some reason, nobody saw value in being a tradesman.
Yeah.
And I worked out of these companies that would like hire you on, and
right.
And out here, it's like when I came out here, and when I gave my resume and I told them what I was looking to make, which was, I knew I was going to take a pay cut, and
from New York,
New York, yeah. And so when they basically like kind of smirked at me and was like, nobody's going to pay you what you're looking for, and I was looking for like $25 an hour.
Okay,
and that's not asking for a lot.
What year was this?
2018.
Oh, okay. All right.
So this is not that long ago. This is pretty recently.
A couple years ago. Yeah.
So I was just like, okay. And I will do anything to make something work. So I took the job, and I was grateful for that. And I'm very grateful to this day for them giving me an opportunity to get my feet on the ground.
And that was here in Prescott.
That was here in Prescott Valley. So let me just say that so we had been to Sedona on vacation. So we had never heard of Prescott Valley or Prescott.
Okay.
When we went back to New York after being on vacation, I was looking, and again, I'm working in the subway. I'm looking at pictures of Sedona. We just got back from there. I'm like, oh, I got to get out of here. I'm like, I just want to be there, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking for a job. Nobody was hiring. I called all these companies, even Phoenix companies. I couldn't get a job, and I was just like, all right. I don't know if my resume maybe like put people off because it was I just had a lot of experience.
Yeah.
But nobody called me back. And then finally, I got a hold of this one fella who owns a company up here, still does. And he was willing to give me, he was like, so basically, he was going to give me he gave me an interview. So he said, are you living here? I said, no, I'm not. I still got the emails. It's really funny.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not. I said, but I want to move there. He said, well, call me when you move here. And see, that wasn't good enough for me. I was like, no. If you could promise me, if you could, give me an interview, I'll come out there and see how it goes.
Yeah.
He was like, okay. This was like, I probably was talking to him like on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Or like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Okay. I said, if you could promise me an interview, I will be out there Monday. He says, okay, I'll give you an interview on Monday. I said, okay. He says, but there's a project that hasn't started yet. I don't know when I could put you on. I said, no problem. I told Amber, we had a plan. We were going to wait like a year.
Yeah.
I got the phone. So now this Prescott Valley. I never heard of Prescott Valley. I'm looking around. I'm like, okay. Even before I spoke to my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, she was my girlfriend.
Right,
Amber was my girlfriend. And I was like, I found an apartment. I just leased it, and I just leased a car. I financed a car, and I told her, I said, hey, I'm packing my stuff. I'm packing all my tools, my clothes, and I'm leaving, and I'm going out there. I got a job interview for Monday. I got this apartment for us. She's like, what? She goes, we have a plan and we're going to leave. I'm like, Amber, that's it. Like, we're going. And she probably thought I was insane, but she also knows me. So she probably wasn't.
She was there for the ride.
Yeah. So now I do that. I leave. The car dealership comes and picks me up at the airport. I go sign all the paperwork for the car, and I drive up to Prescott Valley with all my 3 full suitcases full of hard hats, tools, everything. Crazy. Right? Told Amber, pack up the apartment, throw everything out. We'll figure it out.
That's wild.
So I drive up to the apartments, and then I have the interview with this guy on Monday. It's funny because I show up. The interview is at Starbucks on Glasgow Hill Road. I show up in. Anytime I've ever gone on I've always gotten dressed to go. I always felt like it was good to go and
nice polo shirt.
Yeah, but never had to go for a job interview in New York because I worked in the union. You didn't have to go for a job interview, right? But anyway, I got this long trench coat on, this All Saints trench coat that's like fitted. So I'm dressed. So when I show up, the guys look at me like, "Hey, are you an electrician?" So I'm like, "Yeah." So and then the whole thing. But I wound up getting the job. I was really excited. I was really grateful. Still, I'm very grateful to them today for giving me that opportunity. You know,
yeah, because when you moved out here, did you drive? Did you drive? Oh no, you flew out here.
Flew out to
with all your stuff,
all my stuff,
right? And at that point, you didn't have a job.
I didn't have anything.
All right.
I didn't have a promise of anything. I just came out here, and I was like, I'm gonna make it work.
Yeah.
And I remember my father telling me, I was sitting in a restaurant across the street from my apartment on York Avenue. My father, my uncle, who lived across the street from me, he's 90 years old, and I remember him saying, "I hear you're going to Arizona." So I said, "I'm thinking." He's like, "Yeah." I said, "He's like, I heard you thinking about it." So I said, "I am." He goes, "Well, what's in Arizona?" I said, "It's not here."
Yeah.
I was like, "I just want something different." He was like,
Right.
"All right." And my father was like, "Oh, you'll be back." And I was like, "No." I was like, "I'm not gonna be back." I was like, "I'm gonna, whatever I do, I'm gonna make it happen." You know. So, but I've always been, not to toot my own horn, but like I said, I was an electrician by day.
Yeah.
And I was back in 2004. I started a band, and that was another job. We
Right.
wrote our own music, published our own music. You know, I traveled a lot with that.
Yeah.
At one point, we were on the radio in New York and Jersey. We were doing
Nice.
really good. And I thought at like 2006, around 2006, 2007, we were gaining a lot of traction. I had an interview on WPLJ with Race Taylor, like, you know, our band. And
Yeah.
it was like, I felt like we were playing the Hard Rock Cafe. Like, you know, we were playing big venues.
That's
like,
cool.
yeah, Webster Hall.
Yeah.
So I had thought at that time that this was working out,
Yeah.
and it was like I was kind of like, and I was so happy because like I wanted that. I didn't want to
Right.
be. I kind of felt like a musician posing as an electrician, even
Right.
though I've been an electrician for some time at that time. But
Right.
that's what I really wanted to do with my life, and it felt like it was taking that. It was working out.
Yeah.
Right. And then. That was a full-time job.
Yeah.
You know?
So what happened with that? Because so 2006, 2007, you were right there before the 08 whole situation, recession, and all of that.
Yeah.
Did that play a role in?
No, we were super busy. So no, actually during the whole 2008 crash with the whole housing market and stuff, again, construction in New York was booming.
Really?
Oh yeah. So I was working around the clock.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on a job at Goldman Sachs at the time, and at this time the trade center was going up.
Yeah.
It took years for that whole project. Silverstein.
Oh, right,
you know.
right.
So at that time, they were starting to pour the I remember the slurry. You could still see the slurry wall. I mean, that they were starting to pour the foundations for the trade center across the street, and I was going back and forth, and it was. I was literally like sleeping on job site. You know, I was working a lot at that
Right,
time, so
right.
that didn't affect us at all.
Yeah.
In the construction industry, no.
Right.
So, but no, it was a conflict because I had this band and I was playing and I was, you know, always saying no to everything. I was trying to make this thing work, and it was just like, people don't realize how difficult and how much energy goes into trying to make something like that work. It's kind of like the film industry, I would imagine, right?
Oh,
I had
sure.
I had a girlfriend at the time who was she was a producer for television.
Okay.
And I seen on that side how cutthroat that business was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was very similar. It was just like people promise you the world,
Right.
and people see, you know, you see people that they see promise in you, and they're like, oh, I'll do this and I'll do that, and
Yeah.
you're just like hanging on to their words and hoping that they're going to come through, and you know, so it was a lot, man.
So do you feel like your experience in the music industry helped you become a better business owner, a better entrepreneur, just by even what you said, as far as people most of the time they overpromise and underdeliver?
Yeah.
With you guys, I know it's a huge part of your culture at Allied Electric to make sure that you always overdeliver. And so do you think that had an impact in your career now?
Yeah, so where that would tie in is in the sense of you have to have, and I'm not a religious person, I've never been, but you have to have faith in that things are going to work out.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, I've always carried that with me. I knew, I always in my heart of hearts, well, I was hoping,
Right.
which is probably, that part was probably what played into it not working out.
Right.
But I always felt that it would work out.
Right.
Right. I didn't know to the degree that I wanted it to, but I felt like it would work out if I stuck with it.
Yeah.
So that's what carried me through, you know, not sleeping, working during the day as an electrician, you know, being on job sites, and then I knew after work, like, I would get in a van and go travel we'd go to Maryland to go play shows, and then literally, like, on Fridays, the guys would pick me up in the van, because we had a studio in Staten Island. I was living in the city. They'd come pick me up. We'd all be in the van, and from there, we'd just go and play and come back Sunday night or Monday morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then run upstairs, put my guitars away, take a shower, get ready for work, and go back to work. So I was always pushing myself. Yeah. I never really slept. I always had to be going at 110 miles an hour. Yeah. For life to work for me, because it wasn't enough to be an electrician. It wasn't enough to, I had to, and I think that, I know that it's because of those qualities is what allowed me to believe that this could work. Right. That I could actually pick up and leave a place where I knew I had job security. I knew I never was going to be out of a job. Yeah. I had a great place, but it allowed me I had the faith to be like, okay, I know that whatever I do, I'm going to make it work. And now I had my girlfriend, who is my wife now. Yeah. And I can't believe she was crazy enough to actually marry me, because we were together a long time. She was with me through all of this. Yeah, right? She's been with me since 2012. Right. I was already, a long time into my music career, but so she had been dragged through the mud with me. Yeah. So, and her being the same type of tenacious person who was just really driven and focused, I kind of looked at, like, we can't lose, we can't miss. Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a huge part. That's a huge characteristic in just entrepreneurs across the board, right? Some people, I feel like, are born just to have a creative mind and become a visionary, and just to where it's like you look at the world and you look at it with endless opportunities. Yeah. Right. A lot of people don't look at it that way. A lot of people look at it like, you know what? All the cards are played against me. The world is against me. All of these things that they just use as excuses. Right. And very well, and I know that there are so many opportunities out there for you. You just have to start thinking bigger. And I feel like a lot of it comes from family members or friends or colleagues telling them, look, don't do that. That's too risky. Right. You moved across the country, and your uncle and your dad were saying, like, he'll be back, don't worry. Like, they didn't believe in you, And so how do you think that plays into the minds of people who feel like they may not be good enough, or that success is really not meant for them, or something like that? But they also, especially in today's economy, complain and constantly are like, well, the economy's this way and gas prices are this way and I can't afford anything and blah, 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 poor me. When at the end of the day, like, if they had a little bit of that mindset that you have, they could change the whole directory of their life. Absolutely. And so what do you think that somebody, let's just say another electrician or a plumber or somebody in the trades field, is like looking at this and they're like, man, maybe there is something better for me. Like, what is something that they should start doing immediately, even if it's just a mental thing? What is something that they should do to just start thinking bigger? That's a great question. And there's a lot to unpack with that one. Yeah. Right? And unpacking success. Yeah. And right. Exactly. And there's, so I know you and I know you're into the same type of, maybe ideologies that I am. Absolutely. So I think you follow Ed Milet, right? And definitely. So something, as soon as you started asking that question, something that I heard Ed Milet say just came right to mind. And Ed Milet said, and I'm not sure if he's the one who coined this, but he said this. He said that, you're not a victim of life. You're a beneficiary to what's happening, right? And if you just stop and think about that for a second. Now, and I was this person at one time in my life until I read a book called As a Man Thinketh, which is, I think, a parable from a Bible. And I grew up Catholic. I'm not a religious person. Yeah. But well, it's really interesting because I am I'm Christian. Yeah. And it's interesting to get, unique points of view when it comes to this, different perspectives on because I'm 100% with you. Like, faith is a huge part of what I do. And it's just, it is just a different perspective that comes from, what makes us have that faith. You know what I mean? So anyways, continue with that. Yeah. So, again, that statement, you're not a victim to what's happening. Things are happening for you. They're not happening against you, right? That's a very powerful statement, right? And now, because it's perspective. All it is perspective. Right. That's it. That's right. And you got to step back for a second. And at one point in my life, I told you I got thrown out of a couple of different high schools, and it wasn't working out for me. And my life, I've always been that kind of guy who was in conflict with life.
Right.
And some people would say that people that really know me, well, not know me here, but knew me when I was young, would say,
right,
if you would ask them, about me, they'd probably say, hey, he's crazy. Like he's rough. He'll do anything to prove himself. This guy, like physically, right? And I got.
Is there an extreme example of that?
So I mean, in my own personal.
Yeah. Okay. What is one?
So I did just like when I was younger, like any young guy who's got a lot of testosterone, right, and doesn't have any direction in life, and this is the thing, and I have a younger brother who I used to tell this to all the time. I would say, hey, and my father told me this, right, because my father's a pretty rough guy. Yeah. And I kind of grew up in that kind of environment,
Yeah.
So we're from, Brooklyn and Staten Island, so it's just And my father had told me that it was kind of confusing information, because when I was a kid, I remember my father, I came home, I had a fight with one of my friends, and I don't know if he'll remember this, but I came home, I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and I had a best friend, his name was George, right, and we had an argument, fight, whatever, in this neighborhood, we were a lot of kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, I came home and he asked me what happened. I said, I had a fight with George. He's like, why are you fighting with your friend for? He's your best friend. And we lived on the same block. His family was like my family. We were in each other's house.
Yeah.
So I said, whatever it was. And my father says, well, did you have a physical fight? And I said, yeah. And he says, did you walk away? Did he pick up his hands? Did you walk? I said, no. He goes, good. Because if you ever walk away from somebody picking up their hands, I will come outside and beat you up in front of them. So that's the first message I got. The next one I got later on, I had a situation where I was out late one night, and I was like a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't have been in the street at that time,
right.
Like 2 o'clock in the morning, and not a great neighborhood.
Right.
And a group full of guys just got out of a car. They had pulled, and they were probably in their 30s, they were a lot older. They probably came out of a bar or something. I was with one of my friends who looked a lot older, but he wasn't. We were young.
Yeah.
And long story short, we started to. There was a bunch of them, and we started to take off running, and at some point, I heard that voice in the back that said, don't run from anybody.
Right.
And I turned around and I took my chances, and if it wasn't for a woman that actually stopped, so we were in the middle of the street, and it was a pretty, there was not a lot going on at 2 o'clock in the morning in this area, and
so did the friends that you were running with, did they turn around?
No, he continued to run.
So it was you versus.
Yeah. So I stopped, and I was just like, that was stupid. I should have continued. He was obviously smarter than I was. But he just had different programming than I had. Let's just say that, right?
Yeah.
So I had stopped, and at one point I was on the ground. These guys were just mauling me, and then I saw another guy coming over with a knife. He actually had like a kitchen knife, and I was thinking to myself, they're gonna finish me off right now. Like, this is bad, right? And a woman, I don't know where this car came from, but it came out of nowhere, and she almost ran us over in the middle of the street. And she came out
to break it up.
She got out of a car. She realized what was going on. She was screaming, and they took off. And I remember getting up, and I was totally disoriented because I had like 5 or 6 people kicking me in the head. Like, it was really bad. And I got up, and I was just like, I probably was concussed. Like, I went back to my friend's house, and he was like, what happened? And I was like, I was mad at him because he didn't stop.
He left you.
Yeah, but I don't blame him. I mean, like, he was just doing I mean, it was like self-preservation. Like, I'm not gonna. All right, if you're dumb enough to go do it yourself, you know what I mean? I don't blame him for that.
Right.
But so this stuff like that, I've gotten myself into some really bad situations like that. It could have went really bad, but thankfully it didn't, and I'm here,
Yeah.
But so I forgot even what was the beginning. What was the whole? I remember telling the story, but I'm not sure what was the question. But anyway, so that was so I was I had got myself into trouble as a kid. Like I was that person, and that was it. Okay, so tying back into As a Man Thinketh. So as a kid, that's the type of kid I was, right? I read this book and I'm like, wow, you know what? In the book, basically it's about being accountable for anything that happens in your life, whether you could trace that back and see it or not.
Right.
basically, if whatever happens to me, I must have on some level, some energetic level, I have participated in that situation for that to happen. So
right.
Now, either you're the person who will accept that and you have total accountability for your life, or you're the person that says, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. This person did this, so I'm going to react this way. And then it's just constant dog chasing its tail.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I could see in my own life that I have been the author and the creator of everything that's been going on in my life. And I was like, all right, I need to change this.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was kind of like I was on a different trajectory. And my life really, things started to change for me in a big way.
Right.
I became more aware of what I was thinking and my self-talk.
Yeah.
And that's when things really started to change, like, you know, how I looked at life, my, like you said, perspective, how I saw situations. You know, when something would happen, I would think to myself, you know, how did I bring this on? And what did I do that brought this situation to me?
Right.
Rather than thinking, you know, why did this happen to me?
Right.
Well,
right.
this is not fair. It's like, I don't know, what did I do to orchestrate this in some way, on some level? Yeah. So that's the mindset. That's the huge mindset. And that goes back to all of, like, you know, Tony Robbins, and I love
Gary Vee. That's all of their thing is perspective on everything.
And this is going back, like you said, thinking bigger. Claude Bristol wrote a book called The Magic of Thinking Big, which is a great book, and I think that everybody should read that book. Yeah. But it's like, you know, we have a world that we live in our mind. There's the world, and then there's the world that we live in our mind, and they're two starkly different places.
Right.
So
reality versus real life.
Well, reality versus your personal perspective of what's going on, how the information's coming in and being coded, and how you're translating that. Right.
Yeah. Perception.
Yeah. And then we all have these filters, right? That we're experiencing life through our conditioning. Right. Like my conditioning was, a perfect example, when I was a kid, my father telling me, don't ever walk away from a fight. Yeah. Almost got me killed. But it's because of my conditioning. Now, if I was somebody different and I grew up in a different environment and learned differently, I probably wouldn't have done that. Right. I would have done something different. Right. Which would have had a different result. Mm-hmm. But now, we are who we are. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our conditioning was not done by us, but it was done at a time where we weren't even conscious of what was coming in. Right. And so that's something we need to be aware of too. Right. Like, you know, there's people say, you know, why do I keep attracting the same bad relationship, the same person with a different face? Well, it's because it's who you are inside. There's some aspect of your personality that keeps attracting that person, because it's a match. Yeah. Right. And when it's no longer a match, you will no longer attract that person into your life anymore. So, right. Yeah.
So how does somebody change that about themselves? Number one, because, and real quick, going back to kind of the thing that we're talking about with perspective on life and perspective on business and everything else, it goes across the board. Mm-hmm. Like when you change your perspective on things, it changes everything. So like, let's take like a relationship, for example. So I heard somebody say this once as well, where like take your relationship with your spouse. So I'll take my relationship with my wife. Like instead of thinking like, I have to love her because that's my job, right? Or my son, like I have to love him because that's my job, right? Instead, I think I get to love her. I get to love my son. Sure. Like I have the opportunity to have a son, and so that's amazing. I get to do that. So I think about it the same way with business and with my company and with the things that I have the opportunities to do. Is I don't have to wake up in the morning and go to work. Like I get to. And then we think about it on a deeper level. It's like I literally have air in my lungs. Like I have oxygen. I can breathe. Like I have working hands. I have working legs. Like I can see, I can feel. Like there's so many different things. Like why not go and live to the fullest? Because I am blessed with all of these different things that some people are not. A lot of people aren't. Right. So why would I complain about milk being a little bit more expensive than it was 5 years ago when I could just go and figure out a way to make more money to support me and my family and just live a happier life? Like I love that saying. I think it was Brad Lee who said this. He goes, I hate it when people say money doesn't buy happiness, because when you're broke, you can't buy anything. Right. So it's perspective. Because again, I think that money does ruin households and it does ruin relationships and it ruins people sometimes.
It's a magnifier, that's all it is.
I think there's a lot more at play. There's more context to those situations than just making the money.
Yeah. Oh, right? Yeah, absolutely. I think
so anyways, because like at the end of the day, like I've made more money over the last couple years than I've ever made in my life. And I can say that I'm much happier. But at the same time, I also have put a lot of energy and time into my family and into my relationships, so that the business hasn't become prioritized over them. Right. So there's all this balance that comes with like owning a business and being an entrepreneur. So talk about that part.
Yeah, and like you said, so being blessed, you have hands, and I like that. That's just like recognizing the abundance that's in your life, the opportunity that you have, that you were given. But I do believe that if we're on this planet, we are blessed beyond measure. Every one of us. It doesn't matter what you have that may look like adversity. Yeah. Because in that adversity is an opportunity for you to grow, and that's why I believe that's why it's there. I believe that. Whatever happens in my own experience, I like to look at it as if, okay, this is showing up because it's life giving me the opportunity to be better. This is an area where I need. So there's a guy out there. He calls himself the mind architect. His name is Peter Crone.
Okay.
And Peter Crone said something that blew me away. He said this. He said that life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal to you where you're not free. Oh. And when I heard that, I was just going back to As a Man Thinketh, the book, right? Talking about using my arms. And As a Man Thinketh, James Allen says in the book, in one of the paragraphs, he says that the human being, the body, is every fiber and every muscle is a lever for action. Yeah. It's not enough to sit around and think about what you want to do. Or you have to get up and you have to make an effort you have to meet whatever it is with action. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Whatever it is that you own a business. And even if you don't own a business, people think, this is a big misconception. People think that they could be lazy in life and take the easy road, and that they're not going to, because they don't want to face challenges. It doesn't matter. You're still going to face challenges that you need to face to learn to keep evolving as a human being and moving on. So you're always going to be met with challenges. Right. You're always going to be uncomfortable, whether you want to be or not. But it's a decision to meet that huge. And say, you know what? I'm going to be uncomfortable no matter what. Yeah. So I better get used to being uncomfortable, because look, there's the idea of how life should be, and then there's the reality of what life is. And when those two things don't line up for us, which they hardly ever do, we're not happy because it doesn't look like the way it should look, the idea that we have in our minds. And that's where a lot of people run into trouble and are unhappy, because life doesn't, again, it's getting passed through the filters, right? The conditioning, and it doesn't look like what they think it should look like, how it should be. Yeah. So I think that you need to throw out that idea. Yeah. I think that if you really want to be successful, forget about the way you think things should be. Yeah. And just accept things for the way that they are. They're happening at the present moment. Yeah. And show up. And show up for life as it's happening. Yeah. Don't worry about what you think should have happened and why it didn't happen and who didn't do this and who didn't do that. Yeah. You're wasting your energy because it's not what happened. Right. And Peter Crone says, I could complain about my past, but it doesn't make, people may have done things to me in my past. Forget about the way you think things should be. Yeah. And just accept things for the way that they are. They're happening at the present moment. Yeah. And show up. And show up for life as it's happening. Yeah. Don't worry about what you think should have happened and why it didn't happen and who didn't do this and who didn't do that. You're wasting your energy because it's not what happened. Right. And Peter Crone says, I could complain about my past, but it doesn't make, people may have done things to me in my past. And they're not right or they're not wrong. Right. It just is what happened. Yeah. And if I can accept what happened, then I can move forward in my own life and continue on, not waste my energy. Because if you think about it, another guy who wrote a book, I love to read. So he says, you got to do a cross-benefit analysis on things, right? Yeah. For me to sit here and worry about, and people will realize if you start watching your thoughts, that most of the time I'm worried about something that didn't even happen. It's something that could possibly happen. Right, right. And, now owning a business, so I feel like everything that I have done or every step that I've taken in my evolution of my life, all of these challenges, right, that you have to, go through, it prepares you for it's like, it was almost like a setup, right? Yeah. Like if I didn't have certain things happen to me years ago, I wouldn't have had, like, I noticed it, and I'm sure you do too in your business, that you know, you wouldn't have had the tools to deal with it now if things didn't prepare you for that in the past. It's like, wow.
You know, it's crazy. For my mom actually said something that was pretty amazing. And my mom she could care less about being an entrepreneur and owning her business. Like, I love her for it because she just doesn't. And I respect the heck out of it, because it's like, she knows what she loves and she knows what she doesn't, and it's just not her thing. But she did say something once that was pretty awesome, which was, there are certain things in life that you wouldn't have chosen, but you wouldn't change. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good one.
And so one of my situations for that, and honestly, one of the biggest reasons I even started my company, was there was a time in life where I was just broke. I didn't have any money. This was a couple years ago, 6 years ago. And I was just like miserable, because I was like, I know deep inside that there's more. Like, I know I could go get more. And there was a particular moment where I was in the dollar store. I'll never forget this, because it was like a huge part of like why I did what I did now.
Right.
I was in the dollar store. I was picking up dog food for my dog, and my card bounces right at when I'm at the register. Right. So my card bounces, and she said, "There's a line behind me." There's a line behind me, and she says, "I'm sorry, sir."
Declined.
No, she goes, "I'm sorry, sir, but it says insufficient funds." And it was so humiliating, because like, as men, as people,
sure,
you have pride, you know, you're standing in line. I was in this small town, possibly people knew me behind me, and I was like, the last thing I want people to know is I'm broke. Like, it's just, nobody wants that, you know? And so like, it was a humiliating moment. I was like, it doesn't matter what I have to do. It doesn't matter what hard, there would nothing be that's harder than that. Because that just sucks. Right. And so like, going back to kind of what we were talking about before as well, was my dad has always said this, and family members that I have always said this: at the end of the day, you just have to choose your hard.
That's right.
Nothing will ever be easy. But at the end of the day, you have to choose your hard. And that may be starting a business, or that may be being broke. Either way, you're miserable. Right. And I don't even mean to say miserable, but like, if you're broke and you work a job that you don't like, you're double miserable. But let's say you start a business and you start making more money. It's hard to do that. It's risky to do that. And many people may disagree with that decision, and it's hard to do that. But you're going to be miserable doing your job that you make no money at anyways.
That's it.
So might as well make a hard decision and maybe live the rest of your life extremely happy. Worst case scenario, just go get a job. You know,
I think that's really powerful. I think that's, again, a situation that was a catalyst for you.
And 100%.
100%. And it was life setting you up for success.
Exactly.
Giving you an
I'm glad it happened now. That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't have chosen that in that moment, but I wouldn't change it now that it's happened.
Right. And that's the way your mom put it was beautiful. Right. Because it like eloquently speaks to that. And
absolutely.
It's like it was the leverage you needed to make a change. Like, it's being stuck in indecision, right? I forget. I know in the Bible, there's somewhere in the Bible, I'm not sure who says it. He says something to the effect of, "I would not have you hot. I'll take you hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, I'll spew you from my mouth." And to me, it was in that book, As a Man Thinketh. That there in order for something to happen, there has to be something. There has to be some deficit or something to happen for you to take action. Because if all of your life you're on that middle road where you're not having to deal with, you're just kind of like coasting.
Chilling.
That's got to be, for me, that's got to be a living hell. Because I would rather know. I would rather, if whatever my nature is, I got it. Like Emerson said, I got to stand on my nature, whatever I am. Whether I'm good or bad, whatever you want to call it. Stand on it. Stand on it. And
honestly, and that's why I was really excited to have this conversation with you, because it's a very unique thing, for people to hear from different industries. And you don't hear from a lot of people that work as an electrician or as a plumber who own a company that have that kind of drive, who have that level of tenacity that says, look, I want more in my life. I want more for my family. But the problem is now, how do I go get it? And so these conversations are for that. And so, the thing that I want to do before we start kind of wrapping it up is, I want you to talk to the person on the other end. Whether they have a company that's all around social media and marketing and advertising and everything else, whether they're an electrician that doesn't own their own company, maybe they're struggling right now, right? Or maybe they work as a bag boy at the grocery store, or maybe they're a mechanic, or maybe they work a job that they make decent money at, but they just don't know what that next level is for themselves. You know, you made all the big risky moves. You moved across the country. You were broke at certain times. You got beat up as a kid. You've experienced things.
Yeah.
So talk to this person and tell them, like, look, here's the best advice that I have for you, as far as here's the direction you should go to make more money and be more happy, and just to level up and kind of just start unpacking your own level of success.
Yeah. And to close the loop that we initially started, right? Talking about, you know, being successful, and you have to be willing to be okay with, not okay, I shouldn't say you should be okay with where you're at, but know that wherever you're at an advantage. Because if you're even thinking about wanting more, then and desiring more, that's what it takes. That's what lights the fuse, right? It's that desire to want to do something, to want to dream, or to think about something better for yourself, for your family, whatever it's for your community, whatever that looks like for you. To be in that position, to even be thinking about it, you're on the right track. Yeah. Now, what you do with it is now, if you just let it go to the wayside, like it could either materialize into something, or it could be a fleeting thought. Yep. But it's how you approach it, how you show up for it, and how, you know. And I think this is the thing. I told you I've never been a religious person, but I believe in spirit, and I believe that there is absolutely 100% a higher being, whatever that looks like, whatever you want to call it. I don't care, but there is something orchestrating everything. In my own life, I know that there has been direction, and there has been. I'm a pretty intuitive person, and I go off of that a lot. I'm a pretty empathic person. Like, I can feel certain things, and I always listen to that. And I believe that's why I'm still here, doing certain things. But you know, to be successful, I believe that it doesn't take money. It doesn't take. You don't have to have anything to start. You just have to have the determination and the will and a goal. That's what it is. There has to be an objective. There has to, because when I started this business, it's not the same thing that propels me and motivates me today. When I started this business, it was to be self-employed, to have autonomy, to be able to offer, this part still is, but to be able to offer something that other people aren't, a service. Right. Today, it's grown into, and it's beautiful because it's grown into something else for me and Amber. It's like providing opportunity, providing service. Now it's about the customer, but it's also about the team. It's like it's like I just came here 6 years ago, and I didn't really have anything. We didn't. Amber didn't have a job, and I didn't have a job. But we were willing to do whatever it took to, and that's what it takes. So if there's one thing that you need that's going to make you successful, is you got to be willing to do. And I think Les Brown said it. He goes, you got to be willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do, to have the things that other people will never have. So you really have to. So and that's Les Brown who said that. And you really have to be willing, no matter where you're at, to show up for life. To show up in that business, whatever that looks like. If it's a phone call you don't want to deal with, if it's something, an unhappy customer. Look, what makes us a great company is not that we don't make mistakes, but it's how we show up in the face of those mistakes and what we're willing to do. I don't care if it costs me, I don't care if I gotta give somebody the money back. I don't care if I have to go there myself, and I will put my tools on and go work on a job if I have to. I love to do that because I like to be physical. But at the end of the day, I want to do something. I want to give a service that nobody else is going to give. I want to do something that other people aren't willing to do it, but I am. We are. And that's what's going to make you different. That's what's going to discern you from everybody else. And again, there is no competition. In my mind, there is no competition. And I think it was Bruce Lipton who said this. There's no competition in a garden. There's only growth. There's only learning. That's big. And now when I think now, people say, well, you know, what are you doing during a bad day? And it's like, well, why is it got to be a bad day? How about it's a day where I learn more? It's either going to be an easy day a day that's easy, or it's going to be a day where I learn.
Right.
Right?
So good.
I would rather, while we're in it, nobody wants to, it's like,
nobody wants it when you're in it.
Nobody wants it when you're in it. But you got to think about, look back in situations in your own life and go over them and say, where was the biggest growth I've ever had in my life?
Yeah.
What did that look like? At the time, it was more than likely, it was when you were in a challenge.
Right. Stressed constantly.
Right. You weren't sure of what to do, but this is the thing. If you just do something.
Yeah.
And if you do something that's wrong, you're going to find out and you're going to learn anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well just do something. Like you said, you might as well do something you want to do.
Yeah.
And don't worry about how you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing to fail in the first place, you're never going to succeed. If you're afraid, if you're stuck in a decision because you're afraid to make a wrong decision, you're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
You're not going to do anything.
You're just going to stay where you are.
You're going to stay where
stuck.
you are.
Yeah.
And you're going to find yourself. And there was parts of my life where I was there, and you're spinning your wheels and you're not doing anything. And it's like there's no progress. There's nothing.
I think that many people say it, and it's really important to know that every day is a chance to get better. It's just, are you going to waste that day away by complaining and acting like you're a victim of the world and all the cards are being played against you and all of these things? Or are you going to say, look, I can get better at something? In my case, if you're in the social media world, or like I said, in my case, just start getting better at editing, start getting better at putting out content, whatever the case may be. If it's you, meet with Mario, meet with somebody who knows more than you, start learning things, asking questions. I think that's a huge part, is just start asking questions to people.
That's it.
And have a list of questions that you have to get answered that day to get a little bit better that day. Try something new. All of those different things. And you said something too about that Les Brown said, and something that I heard too that was really good is everybody wants more, right? Everybody wants more. Everybody wants that really nice view, but very few people want the climb. Right. And so it takes the climb, and I love that. And that's something that I think about every day is I'm on the climb, and we're always on the climb. We'll never stop being on that climb, which I think is the best part. Like Gary Vaynerchuk talks about the journey and being on the journey and all of these things, and it's about that journey, because once you get there, then what? Like you're always on the journey, because that's what's exciting, because you accomplish things, you fail at things, you learn, and you meet people and all of these things, and it just makes life so fun and exciting. Yeah. So and that's what's exciting about it, right? It's like you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know where it's going to lead, and like you just said, it's ask questions. Yeah. Look, if you want a better life and you gotta, first of all, it starts with self. Okay. If we're gonna wrap up, this is what I want to get back to. Okay. Yeah. If you want to be successful, you better start paying attention to how you talk to yourself. What are the things you say to yourself in that's big during the situations that happen during the day? Yeah. What does that self-talk look like? Because if you're self-deprecating, if you're beating yourself up, that's not making you better. Right. I come from a place of tough love and be hard on yourself, but at the end of the day, that has never helped. Yeah. That does never put you in a mindset where you're going to be willing to do things that are different. You're going to beat yourself up. Yeah. And so ask better quality questions. Yeah. To yourself. Yeah. And also, yes, be willing. Everybody, you can learn. When I wake up in the morning, I say, what am I going to learn today? Yeah. I'm going to meet people today. I'm going to talk. I can learn. I'm going to learn from every single person I meet today. What am I going to learn? Yeah. And I ask my daughter every day when I come home. She's 2.5 years old. Sadie, what did you learn today? Yeah. What was the best part of your day? Talk to me about that. Yeah. Ask questions. Yeah, I think that people don't do that as often as they should, because they're insecure about feeling like they don't know everything. Yeah, you don't, which is wild, because you don't. Nobody does. No, I don't. And the most successful people in the world are constantly asking questions. Like every time I go to an event, the top speakers at the event are always in the crowd taking notes from the other speakers. Yeah. And the people that are sitting in the crowd that are most likely broke and have no money, they're the people that are not taking notes. Right. And the people that are there to actually speak and getting paid six figures to speak at those events, those are the people that are taking notes from people who probably have less money, but they're always taking notes and learning from others and asking questions and all of those things. Yeah. And I think, and what's cool about this and the beautiful part is, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. You don't have to be in media. You don't have to be an electrician. You could be a police officer that wants more for their life. Right. You could be a teacher that wants more for their life. Right. It doesn't matter. Everybody comes from different levels. There's been thousands of people who have been broke, no money, everything against them that have made it happen.
Right.
And there have been people who have been giving millions and are sitting in jail or they're addicted to drugs or whatever the case may be. It's who are you going to surround yourself that can push you to that next level and give you some of the tools and the knowledge that you need to take yourself to the next level and your family.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap with this. For you guys that are listening, thank you so much. Mario, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
It's been an honor to work with you guys. It's been so fun learning from you guys. For anybody listening to this, please follow them on social, Facebook, Instagram, call Allied Electric, give them a follow, engage with their content. They're coming out with fun stuff all the time. And definitely support them because what they're doing here is really, really cool and really special. And you definitely want to be a part of it. So again, Mario, thank you. Yeah.